All righty. What would I do without you, Brinley? All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. I am Doug Drenik. I'm the chair of the Trails and Forest Stewardship Committee. I'm also the vice chair on the Open Space Advisory Committee, and I'm here to share with you some exciting stuff that's going on in the Natick Trail system. I've got a presentation that I'm going to pull up just to sort of keep me on track with my agenda here and hopefully give you a better visual than just looking at my face. So let me pull that up here. Let's see. Can people see that?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So first off, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the trail priorities for 2023. This, as Sarah mentioned earlier, is a fairly new committee. 2001 is when we were officially commissioned, and we've learned a lot in the process. And I think one of the things we learned from last year is you got to keep your goals fairly targeted and realistic. I think we were trying to boil the ocean in our past goal setting and quickly realized that maybe that's not the best way to handle this. So these priorities you'll see in a second here are a narrowed down list, a focused list of what we realistically think that we can handle this year. And in some cases, we've already completed or are in the process of completing some of these. So let me just walk through these. So the first one there is restore the trailhead kiosks. On the top right here, you can see this is at Town Forest, obviously, and this is the old kiosk, and this is the refurbished kiosk on the right. So what we've done, the kiosk is the same, even though it almost looks brand new. We've taken off all of the stuff that was pinned up onto the side. We've contacted actually the Board of Health for the tick information. We'll include that inside the glass. We also removed that little, sorry, this little thing here that had maps before. We're not using maps anymore. We will have in the new, inside the new kiosk, it will have a larger map and a QR code also if you wanted to get the map on your phone, or you could obviously take a picture of that map. And what was happening is these little trail map holders, frankly, were just a trash can. And so you would get trash just stored in there. So we've gotten 3 of these done so far. There's 9 total. The goal is to get those done prior to winter. Our next one you'll see is at the dog park there, the Middlesex Path, right by the dog park. So what we're doing, like I said, is we're pulling off all the sort of extra stuff on the signs, the tick warnings and the map holders and all of this. And we've sanded, stained, we replaced the plexiglass. In some cases, that plexiglass was opaque. You could barely even see through it. So we've got new plexiglass installed as well. And then we're obviously staining that and trimming up around the base of the kiosk in order to make it look nice. So both the ones at Town Forest are done, and the one over at Coolidge Hill was completed a couple weeks ago. We'll continue to chunk those out throughout the fall and hopefully get those done prior to winter setting in. But I think it'll make things look a lot nicer, and you will also see consistent, standardized information inside each one. So it's not going to be a hodgepodge. There will probably be a little bit blurb about what that property is, the history behind the property, a large map, a request to pick up after your dogs, a tick warning, that kind of thing. And we'll have those consistent throughout Natick. So we're excited about that. And I think it's a visual appeal thing that it just looks a lot nicer and that we're taking care of this property. This Trail Steward program is, I'm happy to say, doing very well. I think our trails are looking great. If you don't know, we've got trail stewards assigned to each of the trails. We ask them to go out on those trails at least twice a month, more if they choose to, and pick up any trash, litter, debris that they may see, cut back some overgrown branches, that kind of thing, and then report to us if there's anything that they can't handle. So namely a lot of downed trees, so that in the chainsaw area, we will have someone else go out there and take care of the chainsaw needs. And the programs work great. We've actually refreshed it recently. There is an active trail steward named Mary Hudson. She has taken over the responsibilities of that program from me. It's helped me out quite a bit because it allows me to focus on other things than sort of organizing the trail stewards. She's done a very nice job of taking that off my plate, organizing the stewards, and then also recently we expanded the steward program to include more stewards in each of the different parcels across Natick. At first, we were limiting it because we thought, well, we wanted to have enough for people to do, but after some additional consideration, we thought it might be appropriate, especially in places like Town Forest that's so big, to have more eyes on the ground. So, and we see a lot of interest in being a steward at the Town Forest, more certainly than any other trail system. And so we hope that this also inspires people to get involved, pick up after the trails. And when I'm out on the trails, you know, thanks to Keep Natick Beautiful and these stewards, I very infrequently are seeing trash. I think it's kept up very well, and I'm impressed with how those trail stewards are handling things throughout the summer. The last thing on this page is improved trailhead signage, and the picture here at the right is a good example of what we would like to do. So if you don't recognize that picture, that's the Oak Street parking lot at Town Forest. And I would consider this sign blight is what I call it. I think it's a bit haphazard, you know, and I think, you know, nothing intentionally. I think over time people need to have a coyote warning, and then someone sees somebody with a recreational vehicle on there, and then they want to put up that warning, and then there's another warning about overnight parking or ticks or whatever the case may be. And the experience when you walk in there, in my opinion, is not super welcoming. There's no welcome to Town Forest, please abide by these rules. There's just a series of different signs telling you what not to do. And what we'd like to do is come up with a standard and consolidate all of these into one sign that we could hang potentially on the barrier there for cars. Like I said, that says something to the effect of, welcome to Town Forest. Here are the rules to abide by. Consolidate them all into one and be done with it, and remove all the extra stuff around that. I see a question, Brian. Do you have something?
Yeah, I'm just looking at that bottom right picture and seeing how that sign, this metal sign, is cast off on a 10-degree angle. And that just kind of reminds me of the, you know, the things, the amongst the many things amongst our trailheads, that like the gate there, it's probably all tore up and in rough shape. That I kind of focus on saying, gosh, you know, if you're cleaning up the signage, why not clean up all the signage and the peripheral areas around those trailheads? That we try to get a little more granular and branch out from just those focus areas into the general approach. And you know, it's so important to me because just looking at that picture, it's like, what's up with that? A bent sign? You know, and you kind of take that away from a lot of the spots that you're looking at, and it's like, oh, that would be pretty good, but there's a real mess right beside of it.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think, you know, and this is one of the more popular trailheads that we've got there at Oak Street. And like I said, it's no one's fault. It's just over time, as things come up and new sign or new warnings need to be posted, another sign is there. But it's just, you know, looking at that picture, it's a lot of information in different spots, and difficult to sort of grasp all of that in totality. So hopefully we can make some progress and gain agreement with all the necessary parties to say, hey, this is a standard sign we'd like to put up in these types of locations and have it look a lot nicer.
Doug, if I could interrupt for just a second, I see that MetroWorks has joined us. So welcome to the folks at MetroWorks. And I think you probably know that our guest is Doug Drenik from the Trails Stewardship. Oh, here I go again. Trails and Forest Stewardship Committee. And I am your lovely facilitator today, as both Doug and Martin are engaged elsewhere. So welcome, and sorry for the interruption, Doug.
Yeah, no worries. Moving along, so a couple other things that we've got prioritized. You'll start seeing, if you're on the trails, junction numbers. You'll see an example here on the right. This is something that the trustees does a nice job with on their properties. We have some properties, and again, namely it's town forest, where people get spun around and get lost, including myself. There's a lot of formal trails. There's a lot of side trails that aren't really official trails, and it can be a little confusing. I don't think anyone's going to get lost for days out there, but it definitely does not encourage people to use the trails when they go out and they get lost. So we have started to add junction numbers throughout the trail system where we think there is some confusion of where you might be. And then we've added those trail junctions to the maps that are online so that people, when they use those maps for reference, are able to locate where they are on the trail. So excited about that. And then lastly, Eagle Scout work. We've had some great help and continue to have great help with the Eagle Scouts in town, and actually even the Eagle Scouts in Wellesley did a project last year as well. And so kids reach out to me all the time looking to become an Eagle Scout and try to have a project that would qualify for an Eagle Scout honor. And we are happy to provide them with a lot of different options. This one here you'll see on the bottom right is along Woodland Street. There's a long boardwalk that was constructed when that trail was originated. A tree fell down on it, crushed the boardwalk. So this Eagle Scout project here replaced all of the necessary areas on that boardwalk. And then they also put in, and they've done this in a couple spots on the Eisenmenger Trail, it's sort of an area to remove some of the wetness that leads up to that boardwalk. So they've done a nice job on this. It's crushed gravel. They have irrigation, or I should say tubes underneath that to pass water from left to right or right to left. And it has kept those trails significantly drier because, and especially with the amount of rain we've been getting this summer, this is a big deal. When people go out, we don't want it to be, I think it's unrealistic to think we won't have wet areas on the trail. But for some of those historically boggy areas, we are doing work when we can like this to improve that. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, am I off mute?
Yep.
Yep.
My question is, with those elevated sections and little bridges and stuff, have you developed any standardized manual on how you want those things to be built, or are you just taking them kind of as you come to them?
We do. We have trail standards, we have trail standards and we have bridge standards as well. So we have sort of two variations of the bridges that we prefer to build, and we give those to the Eagle Scouts when they start the project. In this case, that boardwalk was already constructed, so it was essentially replacing the areas, excuse me, that were broken or damaged. So it wasn't necessarily creating a new bridge. There are other scenarios. Henry Wilson's a good example where we use the bog bridge standards that we've got to make sure that it's a nicely done boardwalk and done sort of uniformly throughout town.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to hear that you've got Eagle Scouts actively working with you. when my daughter was in Girl Scouts, this was pushing 20 years ago now, just to let the audience know how much things have improved. The Girl Scouts equivalent of the Eagle Scout Award is the Gold Award. And my daughter wanted to do her gold project at Town Forest and was told, no, people will ruin it, don't even bother. So I'm very excited to hear this because it really shows a lot of progress.
Yeah, no, and we love the free labor and the dedication of work from the Eagle Scouts. They've always been great partners, and like I said, we've had 3 troops that we've been working with. In fact, we had 5 Eagle Scout projects in the last year. I've got another one that's set to start in October, assuming it gets approved, and we have another one following that that may that is scheduled for the spring. So very excited about that. And like I said, it really helps us out in these areas.
I see a hand raised at MetroWorks. I can't tell from here whose hand, but
Yeah, hi Doug.
Pat.
It's me, Pat. I was interested and really pleased to hear about all these things. And I just had a couple of quick questions. The viewing bench that they ripped out of the ground over at Pegan, I sent you a photo of that. Did you and Claire figure out how you might get?
Yeah, we're going to try to get a crew out there.
Back in the ground.
Yeah, we're going to try to get a crew out.
When I say.
We're going to try to get a crew out there, Pat, to move that. As I understand it, it's a several person job to get that thing back out of there.
Yeah, it's got the concrete footings, and I know it's pretty heavy. The other thing, when I was over at Coolidge, the map box and I think a shield from one of the kiosks was just kind of placed by the trash. But I don't know, maybe you guys are starting to replace the shields and the map boxes?
Yeah, you probably missed that. That was the first one that we talked about, and this is an example here of the old and new kiosks. So yes, we have started to replace the plastic, the plexiglass there, and stain it, obviously.
Yeah, it's great. And I was just wondering about the situation at Bill Ramage talks to me about it sometimes. The North Trail at Pegan Cove can get kind of boggy, and there's some wet areas. And I think one of the fairly big wooden boardwalks over a stream is kind of starting to tilt. And maybe you have people who are looking into that.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Pat. And in fact, I have a conversation with Claire later this week to talk through whether she'd be comfortable getting an Eagle Scout project out there at Pegan Cove for this springtime. I think we have, and I think this, have struggled a bit because that's technically DCR land, and we have they are slow to respond is probably a generous statement. I don't even think they respond. So I think what we'd like to do is sort of press the situation a bit and maybe have a negative election to say we plan to do this unless we hear otherwise, because I think that trail, to be honest, is probably the one that needs the most attention. And it can be frustrating when you've got resources to do this, and yet you can't get the approval to improve that trail system significantly. So I hope that Claire and I can work through something on that to make a better plan.
Cross jurisdiction thing is tough. I know.
It is.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, Doug, and don't know that we've met in person. I see Bill's hand is up, but specific to this question and working with DCR, I'm still on the select board, and I'm actually meeting with a couple of folks at the state level next week on economic development. I've been pushing for better, I'll say, autonomy. so we're not forced in this position of begging forgiveness on a couple of things. And that this is a good example of that. If there are specific areas or things we've been trying to do with DCR or other state agencies, if somebody could shoot me an email, I'm happy to surface those with either our legislative delegation or I'm going to a meeting where the Secretary of Economic Development will be next week. And I'm trying to tie in these quality of life factors into economic development out here. So I will I'm just bringing it up everywhere I can and seeing what surfaces, but just another sort of arrow in that quiver.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Paul, for that. I'm happy to send you a note with some of that, and Claire may have. I'll copy her on that as well. She may have some additional information because yes, Pegan Cove and then the Henry Wilson Trail area is also DCR as well, and we have some plans that I think would drastically improve that section, and it's just frustrating when you can't get a response.
Well, that's I use Framingham as that model. Framingham was able, I think the MWRTA and the city of Framingham negotiated a deal with the MBTA to maintain the parking that's around the train station there with the MBTA, because the MBTA basically gave up on them and they were frustrated. They couldn't get stuff done. So to me, I always use that as the example to say, look, communities know best and we have resources.
Yeah.
But for, so if we can kind of get around that, even whether it's Lake Uchittuit or these trails, whatever we can do, but let's keep that going, and I'm happy to keep that on the front burner.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, thank you.
Paul. Thanks, Paul. Bill, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was going to say what Pat was saying about that wet, boggy area on Pegan Cove. You know that, Doug. And that really needs a culvert underneath that little stream in that muddy area because it's just nasty. I tried to work on that myself and it's way over my pay scale. The other thing that I just realized recently at Pegan Cove, which is really a problem, is that first bridge now is starting to deteriorate. There are two different spots where those big 4x10-inch planks are deteriorated to the point where you can see through them. And that's a bridge that was able to take a fire engine over it. And I don't know whether a fire engine would go over it again or fall through. That's going to be, in 10 years, that's going to be a problem. And you and I know it'll take 10 years to get anything done. So the next time you're in the area, could you take a look at that just when you cross that first bridge? And then there's that, in the North Trail, there's that down tree that I've reported on several times. Nothing's happening. It's just, I'm afraid to do it because if it falls down on me, I'm a dead man.
Yeah.
So that needs to be looked at as well. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All
No
right.
problem.
And I do see one hand up at MetroWorks again, and not sure who that belongs to.
Yeah, it's me. Hi, Doug. Everybody, just curious too, maybe you were gonna cover it, but the prospect of getting the CPA funding for some things, I know the committee has to be appointed, right? And I believe Bill's an applicant. I hope he gets on it. But anyway, when will you get some action or processing with the CPA?
As I understand it, Pat, through Claire, we won't see funding until July of next summer. That would be that would sort of be 1 year since the start of it. And that's, as I understand it, when we would start being able to apply for that type of money. I will talk in a second here about some of the bigger scale projects that would tie into things like that. There are some things that we'd like to do, but frankly don't have the money to do. The CPA certainly gives us hope that maybe those aren't that far off on the horizon.
Yeah.
So let me keep going here. So those are the priorities for 2023. Let me just share, since town forest is always a popular topic, I just wanted to share a couple things on town forest. So if you don't know, the vice chair of our committee is Lisa Stanley. She's a botanist. She just completed an invasive management plan for town forest. So we will be talking about that with the Conservation Commission, and the effort there is to try to remediate some of the invasive species that are prevalent in town forest. I think there are some areas where honestly the advice is just let it go because it's gotten to the point where it's so bad. So I think it's a targeted approach to essentially focus our energy on areas that we believe we can remediate, and then other areas where it might be too late. As I understand it, and I'm no botanist, but the joke on our committee is it's almost easier to identify the native species than it is to identify the invasive species, because there's so many invasive species out there at town forest. So that can be a little depressing. We have made some progress against that though in the meadow, and I'll talk about that in a second. But before I do that, I also want to mention beavers is a popular topic at town forest. There was a active beaver dam on the main trail coming off Oak Street. So like if you're probably like right here on this trail, there was an active beaver dam. The town came out and breached it several times. It appears as if the beavers have moved. So they're not gone. They've just moved, and we knew that was a possibility. This is a tricky subject, and I think the one thing that everyone agrees on is nobody wants to kill beavers. And I think, so how do we live with the beavers? And one of the things we've done is we relocated this blue trail here because it was so flooded out because of the beaver activity in that dam, and they even have the beaver icon here, that it flooded this blue trail. So we closed that trail. You can see there's a parallel trail, and this one's uphill a bit, that we ask people to use this uphill version. So we're trying to accommodate these scenarios. In that, it wasn't a huge deal because there was another trail already existing in higher ground. So that to me wasn't a big deal, but we look for those options wherever possible. I know in the past I've talked about a beaver deceiver. We have two of those, actually one of those at Pickerel Pond that seems to be working very well. And this is a system that we hire an outside group to come in and install that essentially allows water flow under the beaver dam, and the beavers can't really tell the water's flowing. As I understand it, their natural instinct is to block it up. And so this deceives the beaver, and they should get an award for best marketing of a name for that, the beaver deceiver. Anyways, the problem with it is there has to be a certain level of depth in that water. And I want to say it's 4 feet, but don't quote me on that. And this stream here in town forest is not 4 feet deep. And so it won't work if it's that shallow. And so we weren't able to do that. In lieu of that, we did breach the dam several times, and we worked with Claire at the town to make sure we have the necessary permits, and DPW comes back there and breaches the dam. The hope was that this would deter the beavers. And like I said, what's happened is I think they finally got tired of rebuilding it there, and they've moved downstream a bit. So we'll continue to monitor that, but it's an active situation that we look for. And then lastly, at town forest is the meadow restoration. Let me show you a picture here. I think this is a good illustration here. So this is town forest, the meadow in 1952. This is the meadow in 2015. You can see it's sort of gone to a non-meadow state. About that time, there was an Eagle Scout project along with the Conservation Commission to come in and essentially take out all of those trees and undergrowth and try to restore the meadow. We've been working on it ever since. This in 2022, I would tell you this green area is complete. We worked on these two yellow areas here this past summer, And this top right corner is what we're focused on this fall. So we're getting close. If you haven't seen the meadow, it is looking great. I think there are all kinds of wildflowers out there right now. We have a guy in our committee, Jim Franzreb, who is very into this. He's organized groups that go out on weekends and pull out invasive species. We also planted a seed mix so that it's replaced with something natural. When we did that this year, it was followed by probably 10 days of dry weather, which if you can, we couldn't have picked a worse time to actually plant it. And then you start thinking, oh my God, all this effort for nothing. Fast forward 3 months and the meadow is looking great. He's actually gone back and tracked the seed mix that we got to see what kind of flowers he's seeing and which seed application that's from. And we're seeing wildflowers from plantings that we did 3 years ago at this point. And so it is a little refreshing to see that all the hard work and effort that we've put into that is amounting to something. And in September of this year, actually this month, we will be going after the rest of that area and to clear that out. The other thing we do with the meadow to keep it intact is we will mow it or have it mowed, usually at least semi-annually, to allow for it to retain its characteristics. So happy about the meadow project. It's a very popular thing. People want to help out with that. We've got a great team of volunteers tackling that. I wish I had a picture of the actual meadow from a few days ago, but if you get a chance to go out there, it's coming along very nicely, and certainly a marked difference from the 2015 photo you see there. Also want to talk about Pickerel Pond. Pat, you'll know this one. This is the beaver. This is some beaver signage that we put in a few years ago that will explain beaver habitats. This is one of 2 of those signs. The other sign sits right next to the beaver deceiver, and that beaver deceiver seems to be working. We have had a lot of work on this trail in the last couple years, and it's like I said, one of my favorite places to go in Natick because it's so remote and isolated, and there's just frankly not a lot of people back there. A couple exciting projects that are going on in the very near future. So right here is, and Pat knows this well, I'll call it homemade bridge that the kids made. Technically it's a ping pong table, I think turned upside down, that is used as a bridge. We're going to replace that because right now it's underwater and frankly wasn't super stable to begin with. That said, with that bridge, you can get over here to this island overlook, and I would argue it's probably the most peaceful setting that we've got at Pickerel Pond for sure, and one of my favorite spots in all of the Natick Trail system. So it'll allow access over to this island overlook here. So the Concom already has the materials to build it. We're trying to organize with someone who knows. They're going to put these things called helical screws that will be the base of that bridge. We have someone from the Appalachian, or excuse me, Audubon, Mass Audubon, coming to help install it with us and provide that oversight that we need. So looking forward to having an official bridge over to that area. I think that'll be beautiful. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier, some bigger projects that we'd love to see completed. The highest priority in my mind is the connection of North Pickerel Pond to South Pickerel Pond. Again, Claire Rondelli has got a grant application in to to get a grant for money to construct a boardwalk across this. This is not an insignificant, this is much different than this bridge over here. This will not be volunteers doing that type of overlook, or excuse me, that type of boardwalk. That said, we have not received official confirmation that I'm aware of yet, but Claire is optimistic because apparently they have come back with a series of additional questions about the project that seem to indicate that they are closely looking at that. This is another thing, Pat, where back to your question about the CPA funds can be used as, so most of these grants are a percentage of the project. And so we could use the grant funding for half, let's say, and CPA funding for the other, and complete projects like this, whereas in the past we didn't have that sort of money to proceed on something like that. I think the reason this grant is it is optimistic is because one of the goals of the grant is trail interconnectivity, and I think you could argue very easily that this indeed would connect that trail system. If this goes through, this would be a big deal. There's even talk of trying to find a way to make a loop around over here, over to the island overlook. This is wetlands, as you can see, is designated there. So that is definitely not an easy task. I've walked it myself. But even without that, it would connect both of these and allow all of these people here to access the full trail system. And if you can't tell, this goes out to Bradburn Road or Bradford Road. I can't remember. I always get those two confused. You've got Huron Drive connected here, and then over this way, if you keep going, there's the Cochituate Aqueduct Trail that will continue taking you into Wellesley. So this is a huge trail system. This piece right here is sort of the missing link, in my opinion, and so super excited if we can get that moving in the near future. Yeah, Pat.
I see a hand up. Okay, yeah, Pat. You're on mute, Pat.
On mute.
Go ahead, I got it.
Oh, that sounds really good. I was curious though about the that south to north connection is really exciting. Is there any possibility of improving that little informal beach down at the, it's off Harwood Road? If you walk down this sort of old,
Yeah, like right here.
yeah, there's an informal beach there that sometimes the neighbors are taking care of, sometimes not. And I don't know if that would be something that could be integrated into it, because it's a pretty nice little area.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it opens up the possibilities. If I'm being truthful, this South Pickerel Pond area does not get anywhere near the attention that the North Pickerel Pond area gets. You know what I mean? And I think part of it is
Right.
it's not a real big area right there. So these are just sort of, I would call this a neighborhood trail right now. Whereas if that boardwalk is installed, that suddenly becomes a much different trail system. And so I think the first step is to get that boardwalk, but I love that idea, Pat. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there for that beach area in particular that would help out.
We were also wondering, am I on mute?
No,
You're good.
You're good.
I was wondering about the maybe a kiosk at a parking designated parking area. I know people do use Huron Drive and sometimes going behind those buildings, but is there any possibility of getting an established trailhead kiosk and everything?
Our ideal scenario would we put one right here, Pat, close to that.
Oh, where's that?
I'm sorry. Let me see. What am I? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Right here. This one, right at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's Erie Drive. Right there. We have a trailhead right.
Okay.
It's just there's no kiosk, so the visibility of it is low for sure. I agree with you though. I think one of the challenges of this area is trying to explain to people how to get into this area. and you're telling them to walk behind this
Yeah.
business here, and they're just like, is that is that real? You know, and so I think ideally, and there's on weekdays there's some trucks parked here, but generally you can find parking here as well, and it's probably easier line of sight as far to get in from here and then go into the trail system here. So that's our
Yeah.
hope, to get something out here.
This is-
Kathleen, did you have a question?
I did. This is near and dear to me because I live on Craft Road, which, as you can see, is in the middle of the Doug's map of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
streets. Yeah, right there. So, you know, I really second everything you're saying here, that the south trails there really are at this point just sort of a little neighborhood walkway, because you can't go very far. And I walk there sometimes just to get out of the heat of the sun in the summer, but it's maybe 15 minutes if you go all the way around there and walk casually. So if it is possible to connect the two, it would just be a real game changer, you know, for people in my neighborhood, but just for the community as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. I think this is one of the more exciting projects we've got on the docket for sure.
And Bill?
Yes. On that same point, I was trying to find an entrance to Pickerel Pond, and I used GPS, and I got on Harwood Road, and I could not find a way to get there. Is that marked at all now? Doug?
Yes, but further back, sort of in the woods. So there's sort of an open grassy area right here that we have not put one out at the, I think there's like a no parking sign. Kathleen's probably better at this than me. But
Terrific. That really helps if you're trying to park there, to have a
there's,
no parking sign.
There's a little meadow, and then there is a strip of woods that's right at street level. So sometimes people park along the street there, but it's really not clear where to park. And then this summer, my neighborhood just had all of the streets redone, reclaimed, repaved, all the sidewalks. There's been a lot of disruption. We're kind of waiting to see how the dust settles, but I think it's really not clear to people where it's permissible to park. And as Doug said, the sign, you have to start down a little trail, this little meadow area, and then you'll see you know, a gate to keep vehicles out, and a little signage about, you know, carrying out what you carry in. So again, not very welcoming, not clear to people, again, where to park. So that could certainly use some improvement.
yeah. And to be honest, Bill, at this point, I don't know how many people would drive to that trail and park. You know what I mean? Again, it's sort of a very quick loop. If you're going to get in your car and drive somewhere, I would think you're going to go around to the larger area. You know, unless there is a boardwalk, then obviously that changes things.
Well, that raises a different question though, Doug. That's what I was able to find on Google. And I need to know where to find the other entrances, and I know you're working on that as well. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I tell people, the easiest probably is as soon as you turn on to Erie off of Oak Street, look to your left. There is a big tree with a big trailhead sign right there, and parking all along this area here, and you can walk all the way down here. I know where to go to Huron Drive, you know, and some people do, and you certainly can park down there. It's just a little bit, it's, you know, it's not our land, so we can't put a sign, a trailhead sign there. So that's what makes it a little tricky there.
I think
that
there is a
Erie Drive.
section. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
I was just gonna say that Erie Drive section, didn't we build some stairs there a couple years ago, Doug? I was on that project, so I know where that is. Yeah. I just didn't realize that was Pickerel Pond. Because you can't see the pond from there.
No, definitely not. It'll take you a while to get to the pond.
I think there also may be a little strip of town land from Huron Drive. The reason I know this is in my professional life, worked on a project on the building that's right next to that entranceway. And that, as I understand it, is that entranceway is actually part of a town road that leads to one of the town water supply wells. That's a backup well. So I think that there may be a little skinny strip of land that the town owns or has an easement to or something, right
Okay.
between the two commercial buildings there.
Thank you, Sarah. I was just going to ask that question. So that's if there's an opportunity to confirm that with Claire, if we need to do anything technically, again, the select board as road commissioners, we could actually sanction a sign out at the street level there and could do something to make it more accessible, because I think there is public parking along Huron Drive there. It should be an issue, but that's the question: is there an official easement or some access point?
Yeah, let me look into that. That's a great question. It would be great, ideal to have a sign there for sure.
Because I remember coming at it from the other direction. I couldn't put a monitoring well on that road because it was the town's road and not my client's road. So, so that's why I remember looking into it.
Yeah, well, they
Mm.
definitely get back there because there's facilities back there that I assume it's DPW has to get back there to maintain.
Right, correct.
But Sarah, now's turnabout's fair play. Now we want to use it for town use, we can stick it to the man.
There you go.
Sarah, what were the monitoring wells going in for?
There was some groundwater contamination under that property that's right next there. And we were trying to, we were obviously concerned about the town's water supply system. So we were trying to put in wells to figure out, what was the extent of contamination, where was it going? So this was a number of years ago.
What type of contamination?
It was chlorinated solvents. Which is like the contaminant du jour from the 70s and 80s. The building there had been a lab, and they said they didn't do it. And honestly, I stepped away from the project. I had to take a leave of absence from my job due to some family medical issues. And so I sort of lost track of the day-to-day details of it, but it's all, if you're curious, shoot me an email and I can very quickly look in the state system and tell you what's going on. But that's an aside, and I don't want to get us sidetracked. So if you're interested,
Thank you.
send me a message and I can let you know.
I just noticed all the well.
One other just think important, sort of confluence of issues here. If as we're successful in bringing signage, bringing awareness to what's back there, whether it's for Keep Native Beautiful, the Trail Steward program, whatever that is, I think it's really important. It's also an economic development issue to let the businesses back there know what's going on, what's there. Let them adopt the trails, let them do it at lunchtime. Like, let's tie in. These are things that younger workers are looking for, is open space and recreation and all of that. I think it's important that we as a town can unify those messages in our shared interests.
That's a good point. Awesome. Let me move on here. I mentioned some future trail work that we would love to see. This is our wish list. So, and this is only made possible with the scenario of potential CPA funding. So none of this is guaranteed, but certainly things that we've been discussing, and whether that's in the open space committee or in the trails committee, things that we'd love to see happen over the next few years. I mentioned this first one already. So this is that Pickerel Pond, that boardwalk connection for the north and south trails. The next two, and I heard earlier some interest in the ADA space, and we certainly would love to have an ADA accessible path somewhere in town. I think the two most likely candidates for that would be the town forest, sort of Oak Street. If you've ever walked in from Oak Street into the meadow, essentially is very flat. In fact, it's maintained to get it as a road. So it definitely, I think, is a potential scenario. The other one is at Pegan Cove, off, is that Middlesex, Bill? Where that, yeah. Walking into that, and then sort of over, if you take a left there over that bridge and into that meadow, is all very flat as well. The interest is to have a fully ADA accessible path leading to some sort of overlook. At one point we were talking about, maybe wouldn't it be cool to have an overlook where the beavers are, and then people could like go back there and actually like sort of watch the beavers, but the beavers have moved on, so maybe that's not a good plan. But regardless of what it is, I think having some sort of ADA accessible path in town would be a huge win for the community. Yeah, Sally.
Yeah.
Hi, yes, I'm just gonna affirm that twice. Twice over, the town forest and Pegan Cove, because I do use a walker. It's a little rickety, I mean, it's a little bumpity, but I really think so many other seniors would benefit. Right now, it's with a little risk, but I'm careful, and particularly in the Pegan Cove. That's a lovely walk there, though that that avenue of those grand pines and trees is just, it's breathtaking. So if Pegan Cove could be a priority, that would be, I think, the town forest off of Oak is lovely too. And it's a little shorter and it's a little, but amen, please keep at that.
Yeah, thank you. No, I agree with Pegan Cove, and I think the density around Pegan Cove is another good rationale for that. And frankly, we spend a lot of time at Town Forest, and I feel like it's not to say that's not necessary, but we also need to prioritize some of these other trails as well.
Yeah, Doug, let me know if I can do anything on that ADA thing. I'd like to be involved with that
Yeah.
at Pegan Cove.
Yeah, for
That'd
sure.
be awesome. Thank you.
I don't know, again, somebody at
Pat.
MetroWorks, not sure who.
Really, I think the ADA enhancement would be fantastic. And I kind of agree with Sally and others that the Pegan walk-in is pretty amazing. And I think it could be developed fairly easily because it's pretty wide and everything. But the Oak Street thing over at Town Forest is also. The other trail is pretty flat. It doesn't have quite the views and everything. It's that Henry Wilson Trail extending, east of the dog park. But Doug, I know you may not have time to deal with this today, but the thing that I've been working on for 10 years, what are we going to do about the road party areas and we still are challenged in a couple areas. I mean, Bill and I and some other people have kind of keeping it together over at Pekin, but there's some pretty heavy party, and Pickerel Pond used to be a ground zero. That plywood bridge was made out of a beer pong table that they had put up, up in the woods there, and we had to clean out hundreds and hundreds of bottles and cans out of there. So I don't know, is that anything that the Trails Committee kind of try to think about?
No, that's a tough one, Pat. To me, it seems like it ebbs and flows. You know what I mean? There will be months where it seems dormant, and then there will be weeks where it's active and then go dormant. You know what I mean? And so it's like the whack-a-mole scenario where you know what I mean? You're trying to resolve these things, and then they maybe move on somewhere else. And so it's a tough situation for sure. With all of that, and it's not just Pegan Cove. They've got them at each one of the different trails systems pretty much across town. I'd like to think that with the help of the buddy bins, and I realize that not all of them get used to the degree with which you would probably prefer, but also keeping things up nicer leads to people feeling good about the trails and are less likely to litter. Now, maybe that's an overly optimistic view, but to me, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to solve kids going out on trails and partying and doing whatever.
I agree. I don't think that will ever be, completely resolved. It's just that, like you said, that when it's kept up and looks pretty good, the people who aren't the party people, the people that we really want to use the trails, they feel a lot safer.
Yeah.
when they're using the trails. And for an example, the surrounding enhancements, or whatever you want to call them, like at Beacon Cove parking lot, there's a bad gouge in the parking lot, like a erosion thing. And I've talked to DPW about that. They said they will kind of fix it. It occurs when it's a really hard rainy season. But even the guardrails around the parking area, if they look good and well kept, then there's less people just tossing their trash, out of the cars. And if it looks kind of decent where the cars are parking, then it really tones down the trashing.
I totally agree with you, Pat. And that's our goal is to make it look nice. I mean, I think obviously if we did something ADA accessible at Pegan Cove, that parking lot certainly would need to be graded as well, because that's part of the challenge there as well. You're right. It's very gouged out right now. Let's see if I had anything else. No, I don't. So just to thank you. If you ever need to get in touch with me, this is my email address that I use for the Trails projects. If you're on any social media, here's our social media pages that you can follow along. Normally, we put out any sort of volunteer opportunities through social media. We've had a lot of good response with that. We also, if you don't know, have, we did have someone in high school who was on the committee. Nate Lord is his name. He actually graduated and is now at college. He's still on the committee virtually, except in the summertime. And what Nate was able to do, and this goes back to someone's question before, is associate more the high school kids with the trail activities. And now myself having a high school kid, knowing he needs to have community service hours, he's a little more motivated to help out and to get those hours. So I'll use any motivation I can to get them to help out. We're trying to encourage that. If you're not aware, and I didn't talk about this because it's not really trails, but the Tiny Forest Project is a big deal. That was supposed to be planted on Saturday, and the rain date is now the 30th. If you don't know about that project, it's a really cool project, and it's right outside the front entrance of the high school. And they've got, I think it's the Natick High School ecology team or something, like some group there that Nate was part of, that is monitoring the that Tiny Forest section. We'd love to engage with them even more in the future to try to get younger people more apt to sign up and help out with the trails. The only other last thing I'll mention too, and this has gone back and forth a while, is we have a proposal from 2 high schoolers that want to put a mountain bike trail at Town Forest. And this is a little controversial. I think for the most part, we walked the trail with them this past week. They both work at Landry's. They have Landry's sort of backing them on doing this. They've done all of the pre-work necessary to make a good case and argument. And that will be moving forward at some point to the Conservation Commission to see how they feel about that. But in my own opinion, I think getting kids on the trails and outside is a worthy endeavor, and whatever form that takes. And if you haven't seen the trails behind Middlesex Path, where they have a jump park and the kids go and they change that up all the time, they put in a lot of effort and a lot of work, and it's certainly impressive to see. We'll see how that goes, but that's the only other thing I wanted to mention. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have, and I see Brindley's hand raised.
I'm fine.
I have a couple.
Sure.
Thanks. The first is, I completely understand about the removing the paper maps, but I do have a question is, as you're redoing this, do you put information there on how people can get a paper map if they want one? Because I do actually run into people who like to have paper maps. So is there a way to get that information? When you're putting up all of your stuff, is there a way to put a line, a sentence on there somewhere that says paper maps are available here or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know of any place where paper maps are available other than your printer at home. I think it's some of
Oh,
the,
I thought we used to be able to get them downtown, because I know I have picked up maps before. We're not able to get them anymore?
if Rich Ames has them, I think what he does is the large all Natick map, which isn't necessarily trail specific. I could be wrong on this. But
I think that's what I picked up one time. I thought that there were smaller maps. I thought I remembered at one point getting that, but
I think there used to be. I don't know. I haven't spoken to Rich about it for a long time, but I think there used to be some small ones.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I did put in the chat the link to the Teeny Forest, because I know that since the date changed, they are still looking for people to help plant. So if anybody is able to be there or supply gloves to help or help in any way, I did put that link in the chat because I know they would love help still.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. And yeah, that's going to be this coming Saturday, the 30th. And Brinley, we sort of go, there's a debate on our committee and with everybody about paper, no paper, get away from paper. Should we drive people to online things? Everyone generally has their phone. And so where we landed is if someone can take a picture with their phone and have it on their phone, or there will be a QR code where you can link to the actual site with the map. That is the ideal solution. Ironically, when we sit out at Natick days and things like that, people want a takeaway. And so, people always come up and they're like, where's the printed maps? So they want that printed map. We're trying to be greener in not printing them. And then, like I said, a lot of times what would happen is they, the little area where the maps sat just became a trash repository. And so that's not good either.
Oh, I completely support the moving away from the paper and having the QR code. I'm very happy for that, actually, because that's my preference. I always was the person taking the picture. I just also have experienced many times when people are like, I want a map. So I just mentioned it because I get that.
Yeah.
Thank you for all you're doing with that.
Yeah, no problem.
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, JJ Lane Park, which is a real nice park and gets a lot of use. On the north side of it is a no man's land separating the residential area. And on the east side of it is that mashup of a fence keeping the shoreline secured for what? I don't know, because it's such pretzel logic. Ever considered trying to get those problems corrected and added to the open spaces, because it's just kind of a wasted trash space as it exists?
You're on mute, Doug.
Sorry.
Still not.
Yeah, just 1 second, guys. Hang on 1 second.
Oops. Didn't mean to ask the question.
No, I think he's got something going on his end.
We broke CWAP,
Brian.
Yeah. Whoops.
I can say today's weather is really messing with the Wi-Fi. It seems to have been all morning, so I do think that there's just issue with internet today.
I lost mine for a while. I don't know what that was all about.
All right, sorry guys. So back to JJ Lane. So JJ Lane is sort of, that is not a trail system for the Trails and Forest Stewardship Committee. I'm more involved in that kind of thing in the Open Space Committee. And to be honest, I don't know the reason for the fence back there, Brian. My assumption,
they say, it's kind of, I think it was just
liability thing.
Right, well, the army wants to be secure. They think the invaders are coming. But, you know, that's a beautiful piece of shoreline down there.
Yeah.
And, the fence that is up has trees smashed through it, holes cut in it, and it's just an eyesore.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's a nice little park with an eyesore attached to the most beautiful part of it, which is the lake. And that pretzel logic to me is like pretzel logic, and the area to the north, there's big concrete precast structures from the town projects that have been there for decades, and pieces of fencing and trash. It's like, come on, this is our community, and is that a public works dump? Or if it's a buffer zone for the neighbors, do people that are adjacent to parkland need buffer zones? I don't think so. It's an archaic kind of a thing that's got stuck in the town's face, and they're like, nobody ever thinks about that. Never mind. And I think it would be a big positive improvement for the community, and stuff like that, I think, is a good task for the open space to kind of latch onto a few of these things and say, oh, look at this. We can make a big improvement here by just tearing down a section of fence.
I'll go check it out, Brian. I'll be honest with you. I don't get back out in that area that often to JJ Lane, but I'll go check it out and see what you're talking about.
No,
Check out there is
fence, it's there, and it's been there for a long time. Nobody, I've talked to a lot of people, and they just kind of say, it's the National Guard. You can't deal with them. But you should.
Brian, that is the case, that when we negotiated the acquisition or the rights to access JJ Lane, the National Guard actually owns the entire park. We just have I think a 99-year lease on the property, but we were not given permission at the shoreline for that reason. Years, even going back 10, 12 years, I remember talking to people at Natick Labs about, can we get access rights to the shore? So we could do a whole walking trail around the whole pond there. And both National Guard and the US Army do not want access back there. I'd like to think we can make a little progress with the Mass National Guard. But that's, again, another example of a place where we need to know what the dysfunction is to go to them with an issue. And, if we're willing to put town resources on maintaining something that they don't have to, the more we let them know they're not doing their job, maybe they let us do our job, and maybe we can negotiate an amendment to that agreement that allows us access there.
Yeah, just straighten the line across there and let them have their fortified defense. And if they're going to put up a fence along the parkland, heck, continue it all the way around the lake, make sure we're really not just a little piece of the park or shoreline protected. Protect us all. What the hell? That's that kind of logic just doesn't really fly in my perspective.
So
I'm kind of off the wall anyway, so not to worry.
So the hand that's up at MetroWorks, Paul, was that for your comment, or was that you, Pat? Okay, go ahead.
I'm just Doug, I'm kind of excited about the way you're discussing the trail signage with the numbers, especially on the town forest, the largest property. It's a little confusing. It kind of like that, like you said, trustees have done a lot of their trails. So the maps, I kind of think on the maps that it would probably be good to go both paper and digital. This is the one that James makes for me, and it's really a pretty it's a pretty good map, and it's pretty big. On this one, I think is 11 by 14, but I was the one who used to put the maps in the cubbies for years, and they were specific to each trail, and I just couldn't quite keep up with it, Plus, Martin and Rich and other people improved the maps and where the trails actually go. So the ones I had are no longer really that accurate. But this is the one that people like to take away when I go to Natick Days and all these places. So Paul's suggestion that we maybe have, at the various town properties, paper map available of at least the whole trail, the whole green space system might be kind of nice, because I don't think it's true. I don't think it's the phone thing is all that universal. I think it maybe you know, 50 or 60%, but there are a lot of people that don't use phones for this stuff.
Yeah, the only thing though, Pat, with that map, and you're right, everybody wants that map at Natick Days, like the overall, but I don't know if that's going to help you while you're on the trail. If you have that map, that's not going to show you, you know what I mean, where you're going. That's going to show you like, hey, there's a trail over in this section of town. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Good point.
so then you end up with like, now you got to create that. Now you're printing like you were doing the trail specific maps, and you got to keep up with it, and it's just a challenge.
I think there is a benefit to the whole system map. Just, you know, I know when I would be doing Natick Days back, you know, when I was on the committee and so forth, there would be a number of people who would look at that map or the previous incarnation and say, wait, what, there's trails over there? I had no idea. And so I think for that purpose, just to get more of the public aware of the resources that we do have in town, I think there is some value to people having that map to just look and say, oh, look at this. I mean, I have to say, I had lived here for 10 years before I knew that there was all that land at Timothy Coolidge Hill that I could walk to. And, you know, we were out one day wandering around. It's like, wow, we're wandering around in all these woods for an hour. We had no idea they were here. So I think there's some value from that purpose, that perspective of just bringing knowledge to the public that these resources exist.
Yeah.
I agree.
One last
I
thing.
agree with you, Sarah. Oh, I just wanted to say about because maybe I should have been filled in a little better. The people that have always asked me for maps are people with children wanting those. Like the Cub Scouts wanted them when they were going on their trail hikes, and a lot of adults would like their kids to be able to see maps instead of staring at a phone all the time. And that's, from my experience, been the largest request for having paper for a specific trail.
Yeah, I would just like to add on that the concept that, like, I wish a high school had a requirement or every high school student have some concept of living in a community in a bioregion. And that whole town map kind of gives you a sense of how interesting and complicated and beautiful Natick is, you know, with large freshwater systems and trails and green spaces and wetlands and forests. It seems to me it ought to be required to our kids have that education.
You know, one thought, you know, the Rotary does the dictionary handout for the elementary school students. I'm wondering maybe we can get a Rotary or another organization to be that sponsor for kids in particular. We actually put maps in the hands of every student in Natick. And then the other thought too, rather than printing everything, maybe we just designate those town facilities as printing stations, where if people want to go get one, we have something at the ready where they can. That way we're not too, I know we have to maybe do them in bulk, so that might not be practical, but I'm thinking about how do we green this, but also how do we make it accessible for people. But you know, I think if we could get private money, that's a good in-kind donation from a nonprofit to basically hand them out to the kids. And that way the families all have them, or the scouts or whatever that is, yeah.
And I think that there's infinite, like Brindley was saying earlier, there are infinite service possibilities for not just high school, middle school and high school kids to do stuff in all of our green spaces. You know, I mean, I wouldn't have the time to organize it, but they do come to me often and ask me, hey, Pat, is there a project here or there? Just like they do with you, Doug. So I think that there are lots of, and it's walking distance really from the school to where these places are. It's not like they have to be bused necessarily, but they can get out there and they can really do something, and it can help us with maintaining meadows and cutting back some of the invasives and, you know, picking up trash or whatever.
Paul?
Thank you. I heard you mention Rotary, either Paul or Pat, and helping with funding. And I belong to one or two rotaries in Natick. I belong to Charles River Rotary in Natick. And we had been doing the dictionary program for many years. We do scholarships to keep that. But we also had been doing the dictionary in Framingham, and we stopped that a couple of years ago. And what I think, I love that idea of putting a map in every child's hand in Natick. I think every child should know Natick by map. You know, I mean, the maps I've seen of Natick are pretty informational, and I don't know if they have designated trails on them, but that's something that we'd have to talk to Doug about and tweaking them up a bit. You know, you can tweak up anything, any map or booklet. I do that with my booklets for my programs, behavioral health programs. I tweak them up, and we could tweak up a map, and I'd be glad to help. I mean, maybe get one of your Eagle Scouts for projects. I also do have Eagle Scouts do some projects with me, so that's a great idea. Whoever brought it up, Pat or select person, Mr. Joseph.
Can I also say, Natick High had just retired teacher named Susan Haverstick, and she ran a fantastic, it was almost like an environmental science class. And she would take the kids out and they would walk different trails and different ponds, and she would teach them about the whole ecosystem. And she was fantastic. I don't know who the teacher is that runs that class now, and if it's still run the same way, but they do offer that class at the high school.
That's good. You know about that, Doug?
No, I did not know this.
Yeah, I'll ask my sister-in-law is a history teacher up there. I'll ask her.
I can say the new APES teacher, AP Environmental Science, is Miss Tully, and my son is in that class. And they are going out. I don't know if she's doing as much. I know the previous teacher has definitely missed, but I know that she is trying to pick up and carry the torch.
Great.
Miss Tully is wonderful.
She is really wonderful.
Don't forget, Danielle spent 32 years with the schools.
I love the concept of engaging students early on in whatever way we can, and like, for example, over at Lilja, there's a pond trail right behind Lilja, but it's gated off. And so we've got some designs to try to improve that section over there, with the hopes that the kids can go back there when they need to. And in fact, there's some old, and they're rotted out at this point, but like informational sort of signage back there that were created by the kids at Lilja. It must have been years ago, because they're all rotted out. But the talk about the birds and the animals that you would see when you're walking back there, and give them a chance to view those. So it's over at Morse Pond. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you for the time. I appreciate it. And like I said, you can always reach out to me in email at naticktrails@gmail. If you have any questions, or if you want to get on any lists that we have. It's certainly, motivating to see the energy level when we talk about these types of scenarios with the community. I recently did, in the deck that I showed you, was an updated version of something I did with the Historical Society probably 2-3 months ago. So getting the message out, I always find a warm and welcoming audience for these discussions. So I appreciate your engagement and questions, and certainly we'll take a lot of this back to the committee.
Thank you so much, Doug, for taking the time to speak with us, and for all the work you're doing. Absolutely appreciated, I think, by one and all. So thank you so much.